The bridge of the human colony ship Terra Nova hummed with quiet activity as Captain Jake Morrison reviewed the morning reports. 3 months into their journey to establish a new mining colony on Tau Ceti, the routine had become comfortable. The stars stretched endlessly outside the viewports, and the crew moved with practiced efficiency through their daily tasks. "Captain, I'm picking up something unusual," called Lisa Carter from the communications station. Her voice carried a note of concern that made Morrison look up from his tablet. Lisa had been with the fleet for 8 years, and she didn't get excited about random space noise. "What kind of unusual?" Morrison asked, moving to stand behind her station. The bridge crew turned their attention to the conversation, sensing something important was happening. Lisa's fingers danced across her console, adjusting frequencies and filters. "It's definitely artificial, sir. The signal is weak, but there's a pattern. It's repeating every 37 seconds. She paused, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Sir, I think this might be a distress call." Ryan Walsh looked up from the tactical station. "Any ships in our database that might be out here?" "Negative," Lisa replied. "This is deep space. No scheduled traffic for light years in any direction." She worked for another moment, then her face went pale. "Captain, I'm getting partial translation from the computer. This isn't human." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. First contact. Protocols existed, but they were theoretical. Humanity had been reaching for the stars for decades without finding any sign of intelligent life. "Put it on speakers. Maximum amplification." The bridge filled with static. Then a faint voice emerged. From the noise, the words were alien, melodic in a way that human voices could never achieve. But beneath the beauty of the language, there was something else. Terror. "Computer? Translation status?" Morrison asked. The ship's artificial intelligence responded, in its calm, synthetic voice. "Partial translation available. Language patterns suggest high intelligence. Estimated vocabulary match at 12% and climbing." Amy Rodriguez, the chief engineer, had joined them on the bridge. "Captain, if this is what I think it is, we're making history right now." "Translation improving," the computer announced. "Estimated match now at 31%. Attempting full message reconstruction." The alien voice continued its desperate repetition, and slowly, words began to form in the translation. The computer's voice overlay provided broken phrases. "Help. Dying. They take children. Please." Morrison's blood ran cold. "Lisa, can you clean this up?" "Get me a better translation." "Working on it, sir." Lisa's hands flew over her controls, routing more processing power to the translation matrix. The crew watched in tense silence as the alien message became clearer. Finally, the computer spoke with more confidence. "Translation at 68%. Playing reconstructed message." The bridge speakers crackled. Then a clear voice emerged, still obviously alien, but now understandable. "This is Healer Zethara of the Zalani people. Our world burns. The Vorthak came without warning. They take our children for their experiments. They harvest our people like crops. We are dying. Someone, anyone, please help us. We have no weapons, no way to fight. They said they would make examples of us for the galaxy to see. Please, if anyone receives this message, remember that we existed. Remember that we tried to heal, not harm. Our world is Kepler 442b. We cannot hold much longer. This may be our final transmission." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems. Morrison felt rage building in his chest, a cold fury that surprised him with its intensity. The crew around him showed similar reactions. Amy's face was hard as stone. Ryan's hands had unconsciously moved to his weapon controls. Lisa was still working, tears streaming down her face. "How old is this transmission?" Morrison asked. Lisa checked her readings. "Signal degradation suggests it's been traveling for about 2 weeks, sir. Based on our current position and the signal strength, I estimate the source is roughly 47 light-years from here." "Kepler 442b," Amy said quietly. "I know that system. It's in our stellar database. Single star, 3 planets. The middle planet is in the habitable zone." Morrison turned to Ryan. "What do we know about these Vorthak?" "Nothing, sir. The name doesn't appear in any of our databases." "Captain," Lisa said, her voice shaking slightly, "the message is getting weaker. I think their transmitter is failing or—" She didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Morrison made his decision. "Lisa, record everything. Every frequency, every signal pattern, every word. I want a complete record. Ryan, plot a course for Kepler 442b. Amy, I need you to check our supplies and fuel reserves." "Sir," Ryan said carefully, "that's 47 light-years. Even with our best hyperspace jumps, that's weeks of travel. And we're a colony ship, not a military vessel." "I'm aware of our limitations," Morrison replied coldly, "but I'm also aware that somewhere out there an entire species is being slaughtered while we debate." He moved to his command chair and activated the ship-wide communication system. "Attention, crew of the Terra Nova. This is Captain Morrison. Minutes ago, we received a distress call from an alien species called the Zalani. They are under attack by another species called the Vorthak. The Zalani are being systematically murdered and enslaved. I am setting course for their homeworld to provide whatever assistance we can." He paused, letting the magnitude of the situation sink in. "I know this changes everything. We're supposed to be establishing a mining colony, not playing hero to aliens we've never met. But I've heard their message, and I cannot ignore it. No human with any decency could. We may be just one ship, but we're going to try." Morrison closed the channel and looked around his bridge. "Any objections?" Amy spoke first. "None here, sir. Those bastards picked the wrong species to genocide." Ryan nodded grimly. "Agreed. Though I should point out that we'll need to contact Earth Fleet Command. They need to know about this." "Already on it," Lisa said. "Preparing a full data burst transmission to Earth. All the recordings, our analysis, everything." Morrison settled into his chair as the ship began to change course. Outside, the stars shifted as the Terra Nova oriented toward a distant system where an innocent species was dying. He thought about the Zalani's final words. "Remember that we existed." Not if he could help it. They would do more than remember. They would act. The human race was about to make its first contact with alien life under the worst possible circumstances. But Morrison was beginning to realize that might work in their favor. Humanity had always been at its best when facing impossible odds and fighting for others who couldn't fight for themselves. The Vorthak had made a fatal mistake. They had sent a distress call into the void, and humanity had answered. The message from the Terra Nova reached Earth exactly 18 hours after Captain Morrison had first received the Zalani distress call. The quantum communication burst traveled instantly across the galaxy, carrying with it recordings that would change everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. Admiral Kate Sullivan was enjoying her morning coffee when her aide burst into her office aboard the orbital station, New Geneva. The young officer's face was pale, his hands shaking as he handed her a secure tablet. "Ma'am, you need to see this immediately. It's from the Morrison expedition." Kate had served in the Terran Defense Force for 23 years. She had seen combat during the Mars Rebellion, survived the asteroid mining wars, and commanded fleets through a dozen smaller conflicts. Very little surprised her anymore. But as she watched the translated Zalani message, she felt her blood turn to ice. Within 2 hours, every major military commander in human space was aboard New Geneva. The station's main conference room had never hosted such a gathering. Admiral Sullivan looked around the table at faces she had known for decades. General Nick Thompson from Earth Defense Command sat across from her, his weathered face grim. Colonel Steve Parker had arrived from Mars only minutes ago, still wearing his dress uniform from some ceremonial function. Commander Helen Brooks represented the Outer Rim Fleet, while a dozen other senior officers filled the remaining seats. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Sullivan began, 3 hours ago, we received confirmation that we are not alone in the universe. Unfortunately, we also learned that the galaxy is a much darker place than we hoped. She activated the holographic display at the center of the table. The Zalani message played in its full translated form. When Healer Zethara's voice faded into static, the room remained silent for a long moment. General Thompson was the first to speak. "How reliable is this translation?" "Dr. Alex Chen from our Xenolinguistics department has verified it," Sullivan replied. "The translation algorithms used by the Terra Nova are state-of-the-art. We're looking at 92% accuracy." Dr. Chen, a thin man with graying hair, leaned forward. "The language patterns are unlike anything in our databases, but they're consistent with high intelligence and complex emotional expression. Based on the linguistic analysis, I'd estimate the Zalani are at least as intelligent as humans, possibly more so." Commander Brooks studied the star charts displayed on her tablet. "Kepler 442b is 47 light-years from the Terra Nova's current position. What's our nearest military asset to that system?" "That would be the patrol group under Captain Tony Richardson," Colonel Parker answered. "But they're still 33 light-years out, and there are only 3 destroyers with a supply ship." "What about a proper fleet response?" General Thompson asked. Admiral Sullivan pulled up the fleet deployment charts. "We could assemble a task force within 72 hours. Pull ships from the home fleet, redirect some patrol groups, maybe borrow a few ships from the Colonial Defense Forces." "How many ships are we talking about?" Thompson wanted to know. "Best case, 47 combat vessels, including 2 dreadnoughts, 4 carriers, and enough support ships to maintain extended operations." Dr. Chen cleared his throat. "If I may, we need to consider the implications here. This is first contact with an alien species. The diplomatic protocols assume we're meeting aliens under peaceful circumstances," Thompson interrupted. "These Zalani aren't in a position to negotiate. They're being slaughtered." Commander Brooks nodded. The general's right. "This isn't a diplomatic mission. It's a rescue operation." Colonel Parker leaned back in his chair. "Let's be realistic here. We're talking about deploying a major fleet 47 light-years from home to fight an enemy we know nothing about. We don't know how many ships they have, what kind of weapons, what their tactics are. We know they're genocidal monsters," General Thompson said flatly. "That's enough for me." Dr. Chen activated his own display, showing what little analysis they had managed. "Based on the Zalani transmission, we can infer a few things about these Vorthak. They have faster-than-light travel, obviously. They have weapons capable of planetary bombardment. They conduct biological experiments on captive populations, and they seem to view other species as resources to be harvested. Admiral Sullivan studied the data. In other words, they're everything we hoped we'd never encounter out here. There's something else, Dr. Chen continued. The Zalani mentioned that the Vorthak said they would make examples of us for the galaxy to see. That suggests this isn't an isolated incident. These Vorthak have done this before, probably many times. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just dealing with a single act of aggression. They were looking at evidence of a species that systematically destroyed others. Options? Admiral Sullivan asked. General Thompson didn't hesitate. We mobilize everything we can and hit them with overwhelming force. Show them that humanity doesn't tolerate genocide. The political implications, began one of the junior officers. Can go to hell, Colonel Parker finished. We're talking about the systematic murder of an entire species. There are no political implications that matter more than that. Commander Brooks was studying the tactical display. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. No half measures. We go in with enough firepower to end the threat completely. Admiral Sullivan looked around the room. All in favor of full military response? Every hand went up without hesitation. Dr. Chen, I want everything you can give me on Vorthak biology, technology, anything. Use our best xenobiology computers. Run every analysis you can think of. Already started, Admiral. We should have preliminary reports within 6 hours. Sullivan turned to the others. General Thompson, you're in overall command of ground operations if it comes to that. Colonel Parker, I want every Marine we can spare. Commander Brooks, start pulling together our fleet assets. I want the biggest, most powerful task force we've ever assembled. She stood up, and the others followed. Gentlemen, lady, we're about to make history. Humanity's first contact with alien life is going to be a war. Let's make sure we win it. As the officers filed out to begin preparations, Dr. Chen remained behind with Admiral Sullivan. Kate, he said quietly, using her first name despite the formal setting. What if we're making a mistake? What if there's more to this situation than we understand? Sullivan looked at him with steel in her eyes. Alex, I've listened to that transmission a dozen times. I've heard the terror in that alien's voice. I've heard them begging for someone, anyone, to remember that they existed. She paused, her jaw tightening. Maybe we don't understand everything about this situation, but we understand enough. An innocent species is being exterminated, and we have the power to stop it. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. Then God help the Vorthak, because humanity is coming for them. Admiral Sullivan was already thinking about fleet compositions and hyperspace routes. Across human space, the largest military mobilization in history was about to begin. The Vorthak had picked the wrong species to commit genocide in front of. They were about to learn why humans were the apex predators of their homeworld. The order went out across human space at exactly 1430 Earth Standard Time. All available fleet assets to report for immediate deployment. Priority Alpha authorization. No delays accepted. Fleet Admiral Tony Richardson received the message while his patrol group was conducting routine exercises near the Proxima Centauri system. Within minutes, his 3 destroyers were changing course for the nearest fleet rendezvous point. Richardson had served under Admiral Sullivan during the Mars conflicts, and he knew that she didn't issue Priority Alpha orders lightly. On Luna base, the massive orbital shipyards that had been humanity's pride for the past 50 years suddenly burst into frantic activity. Chief Shipyard Coordinator Ben Davis watched from the command center as every available berth began preparations. Ships that had been scheduled for routine maintenance were suddenly being prepped for immediate deployment instead. How many ships? Can we have ready in 72 hours? Davis asked his operations manager. If we skip all non-essential maintenance and pull every technician we have, maybe 36 combat vessels, sir. Davis shook his head. Not good enough. We need more. Across the solar system, similar conversations were happening at every major naval facility. The Mars orbital yards were pulling ships from the Colonial Defense Force. The Jupiter Fleet Depot was recalling every patrol vessel within 3 days' travel. Even the frontier stations were being stripped of everything except the bare minimum needed for system defense. Captain Maria Lopez received her orders while the dreadnought Retribution was docked at Titan Station for crew rotation. The message was brief. Report to Fleet Assembly Point Gamma immediately. Prepare for extended operations. Enemy contact probable. Lopez had commanded the Retribution for 4 years, and she knew her ship better than anyone. The massive vessel was humanity's most powerful warship, armed with kinetic cannons that could crack a moon and enough missile tubes to level a continent. But it had never been tested against alien technology. All crew to duty stations, she announced over the ship's communication system. Cancel all shore leave. We're departing in 6 hours. On the industrial world of New Pittsburgh, Factory Supervisor Linda Hayes was working the night shift when the emergency production orders came through. The government was requesting every kinetic bombardment weapon the planet could produce, and they wanted them delivered within 48 hours. They want what? Her production manager asked, staring at the order forms. Every KEW in our inventory, plus emergency production of everything we can build in the next 2 days, Linda replied. Full authorization to commandeer any materials? We need. The kinetic energy weapons were humanity's answer to space-based bombardment. Simple metal rods accelerated to tremendous velocities. They could destroy targets with pure kinetic force. They were cheap to produce, impossible to jam, and devastatingly effective. Linda activated the factory's emergency protocols. Within an hour, every production line on New Pittsburgh was retooling for weapons manufacturing. At the series mining station, weapons specialist Carl Johnson was putting the finishing touches on humanity's newest antimatter torpedo design when the requisition orders arrived. The government wanted every antimatter warhead he had, plus immediate production of 50 more. Carl had been working on antimatter weapons for 15 years, ever since the technology had become practical. The warheads he designed could eliminate entire fleet formations with a single detonation. But they had never been used in combat, only tested against unmanned targets in empty space. Sir, his assistant asked nervously, these orders are asking for enough antimatter to destroy a small moon. What kind of enemy are we facing? Carl didn't have an answer, but he suspected they were about to find out. Back on New Geneva, Admiral Sullivan was coordinating the largest military mobilization in human history. The main operations center had been converted into a fleet coordination hub, with officers working around the clock to manage ship movements, supply logistics, and crew assignments. Status report, Sullivan demanded as she entered the operations. Center Commander Lisa Ward, her chief of staff, consulted her tablet. 43 combat vessels confirmed and en route to assembly points. 17 more will be ready within the next 18 hours. We're also getting volunteer ships from the Merchant Marine. Volunteer ships? Civilian vessels requesting to join the task force, mostly converted freighters and mining ships, but their crews want to help. Sullivan considered this. Civilian ships would be vulnerable in combat, but they could provide valuable support services. Accept volunteers for non-combat roles only. Supply ships, medical vessels, repair facilities, no civilians in the line of battle. Across human space, the response to the Zalani crisis was unlike anything in history. When news of the alien distress call leaked to the public networks, recruitment centers were flooded with volunteers. Veterans who had retired years ago were requesting to return to active duty. Civilian contractors were offering their services for free. Captain Jake Morrison, still en route to the Kepler system aboard the Terra Nova, received constant updates on the mobilization. His colony ship had become the advance scout for what was shaping up to be the largest fleet deployment in human history. Captain, Lisa Carter reported from her communication station, I'm receiving messages from 47 different ships confirming they're en route to Kepler 442b. Admiral Sullivan is assembling Task Force Vengeance. Morrison smiled grimly at the name. Task Force Vengeance. Appropriate. The task force was taking shape with military precision. The heavy units would be built around the dreadnought's retribution and justice, with Captain Lopez commanding the 1st Battle Group and Captain Ben Davis commanding the 2nd. 4 aircraft carriers would provide fighter support, while 24 destroyers and cruisers would handle escort duties. But the real power of the task force lay in its specialized weapons. The kinetic bombardment ships carried enough metal rods to turn a planet's surface into molten slag. The antimatter torpedo cruisers could eliminate entire fleets with their warheads. The marine assault ships carried enough troops to conduct a full planetary invasion. Dr. Alex Chen had been working non-stop on his analysis of the Vorthak threat. His preliminary report made for grim reading. Based on the fragments of information from the Zalani transmission, he estimated that the Vorthak were a spacefaring civilization with technology roughly equivalent to humanity's, but they appeared to specialize in biological warfare and genetic manipulation. The good news, Chen reported to Admiral Sullivan, is that they don't seem to be significantly more advanced than us technologically. The bad news is that their apparent focus on biological weapons suggests they might be resistant to conventional attacks. Sullivan studied his report. Recommendations? Hit them hard and fast. Don't give them time to adapt or deploy biological weapons against our forces, and be prepared for them to use captured alien populations as human shields. The implications were chilling, but Sullivan had expected as much. An enemy that conducted experiments on captive populations wouldn't hesitate to use those same captives as tactical assets. 3 days after the first Zalani transmission, Task Force Vengeance was ready. 51 combat vessels, the largest human fleet ever assembled, prepared to make the jump to hyperspace. Thousands of crew members, Marines, and support personnel were committed to a mission that would determine humanity's first impression on the galactic stage. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of the fleet flagship Retribution, looking out at the assembled ships. Each vessel represented the best of human technology and determination. Together, they carried enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. All ships report ready for hyperspace transition, Captain Lopez announced. Sullivan activated the fleet communication system. This is Admiral Sullivan to all ships of Task Force Vengeance. Today we begin humanity's first military operation beyond our solar neighborhood. We go not as conquerors, but as liberators. An innocent species has called for help, and we have answered. She paused, looking out at the stars that suddenly seemed less empty and more dangerous. The enemy we face commits genocide for profit. They experiment on children and harvest populations like crops. They believe that might makes right, and that the strong can prey upon the weak with impunity. The fleet hung in space, waiting for her final words. They're about to learn that they're not the strongest species in the galaxy. All ships, initiate hyperspace jump. Destination, Kepler 442b. Time to show these Vorthak what happens when they threaten the innocent. The stars elongated into lines of light as 51 human warships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying humanity's response to its first contact with evil. Task Force Vengeance moved through hyperspace like a silver arrow aimed at the heart of the Kepler system. The journey would take 21 days through a series of carefully calculated jumps, each one bringing them closer to humanity's first real war with an alien species. Aboard the flagship Retribution, the days passed in a blur of preparation and training. Captain Maria Lopez walked through the ship's corridors and marveled at the intensity she saw in every crew member's face. They all knew what they were heading toward, and none of them showed any sign of hesitation. In the Marine quarters, Colonel Sam Turner was drilling his assault troops through their third combat simulation of the day. The large training bay had been reconfigured to simulate urban warfare scenarios, complete with holographic civilian populations and hostile alien forces. "Remember," Turner shouted over the sound of simulated weapons fire, "the Vorthak use captive populations as shields. Every shot you take needs to be precise. Every movement needs to be calculated. We're not just fighting to win, we're fighting to save lives." The Marines moved through the simulation with deadly efficiency. These were veterans of the colonial conflicts, soldiers who had learned their trade in the harsh conditions of frontier worlds. They understood urban combat, they understood precision operations, and they understood the cost of failure. Sergeant Pete Collins crouched behind simulated cover. His team spread out around him. The holographic enemies moved with alien grace, their forms based on Dr. Chen's best guesses about Vorthak physiology. Collins had fought in the Martian tunnels during the rebellion, and he had learned that every enemy had weaknesses. "Target the joints," he called to his squad. "If they're even remotely humanoid, the joints will be vulnerable." The simulation ended with the Marines successfully clearing the objective while minimizing civilian casualties. Turner nodded approvingly. His troops were ready. 3 decks up, Wing Commander Rachel Kim was running her fighter pilots through their own training exercises. The carrier Justice flew alongside the Retribution, its launch bays constantly cycling fighters through practice missions. "Delta Squadron, this is Control," Kim's voice crackled through the communication system. "You're approaching the target zone. Remember, we don't know their fighter capabilities, so assume they're at least as good as us." The human fighters moved through their formations with precision that came from years of training. These pilots had learned to fly in the dangerous asteroid fields around Mars, where a single mistake meant death. They had reflexes honed by a lifetime on a world where everything from the weather to the wildlife was trying to kill them. Lieutenant Karen Wade pulled her fighter into a sharp turn that would have killed most biological species. Human pilots could handle acceleration forces that would crush their alien counterparts, an advantage they planned to use to the fullest. "Weapons free on simulated targets," Kim announced. "Show me what you can do." The fighters opened up with everything they had. Kinetic rounds, plasma bolts, and guided missiles turned the empty space around them into a light show of destruction. When the exercise ended, every simulated target had been eliminated. In the intelligence section, Commander Drew Phillips was working around the clock to understand their enemy. The Zalani transmission had provided limited information, but Phillips was an expert at extracting maximum intelligence from minimum data. Based on the language patterns in the Vorthak communications referenced by the Zalani, he explained to his team, I estimate they're a hierarchical species with strong authoritarian tendencies. The use of words like harvest and experiment suggests they view other species as resources rather than equals. His analysis painted a picture of an enemy that was both sophisticated and brutal. The Vorthak appeared to have advanced biotechnology, possibly including genetic manipulation and biological weapons. But they also seemed to rely heavily on fear and intimidation rather than pure military might. Their mistake, Phillips concluded, is assuming that fear works on everyone. They've never encountered a species that gets angry instead of scared. Dr. Janet Foster was preparing for a different kind of battle in the medical sections of the fleet. The chief medical officer had turned every available space into treatment facilities, expecting massive casualties from both sides of the coming conflict. "We need to be ready for biological contamination," she explained to her staff. "The Vorthak apparently specialize in biological warfare, which means they might deploy pathogens or toxins against us." Foster had served as a combat medic during the Mars Rebellion, where she had learned to treat everything from radiation poisoning to exotic alien parasites picked up from contaminated mining equipment. She understood that military medicine was about more than treating wounds. It was about keeping an army functional under the worst possible conditions. "We also need to prepare for treating alien patients," she continued. "The Zalani survivors will need medical attention, and we don't know anything about their biology." The medical teams worked with the same intensity as the combat units. They understood that their job was to save lives, both human and alien. On the 10th day of the journey, Captain Morrison's colony ship Terra Nova finally reached the edge of the Kepler system. The advanced scout ship had maintained radio silence. During its approach, using passive sensors to gather intelligence without revealing its presence, "Captain," Lisa Carter reported quietly, "I'm detecting multiple artificial signals from the direction of Kepler 442b. Strong transmissions, definitely. Advanced technology." Morrison studied the sensor readings. The signals suggested a significant alien presence in the system, far larger than a simple raid or exploration mission. "How many ships are we looking at?" Amy Rodriguez had been analyzing the sensor data for hours. "Best estimate? At least 15 major vessels, possibly more. They're not trying to hide their presence." Ryan Walsh was monitoring the tactical sensors. "Sir, I'm also detecting what might be planetary bombardment signatures, energy discharges consistent with orbital weapons fire." Morrison felt his jaw clench. The Vorthak were still attacking the planet, which meant there might still be Zalani, survivors to rescue. He activated the hyperspace communication system and sent a coded burst transmission to the approaching task force. "Admiral Sullivan, this is Morrison. We've reached the objective. Enemy presence confirmed, estimated 15+ major vessels. Planetary bombardment ongoing. Zalani may still be alive." The message would take several hours to reach the task force. But Morrison knew what Sullivan's response would be. The fleet would arrive in 11 days, and they would arrive ready for war. Back on the Retribution, Admiral Sullivan received Morrison's report during the daily command briefing. The news that the Vorthak were still in the system was both good and bad. Good because it meant they could engage the enemy directly. Bad because it meant the genocide was still ongoing. 11 more days, she announced to her senior staff. 11 days for the Vorthak to continue their slaughter. General Thompson, who had joined the fleet aboard one of the Marine assault ships, shook his head grimly. "Every day we delay is another day of atrocities, but rushing in without proper preparation would just get us all killed." Dr. Chen had been studying the intelligence reports from the Terra Nova. The good news is that 15 ships suggests this is a raiding force, not their main fleet. If we can defeat them decisively, it might give other threatened species hope that the Vorthak can be beaten. Sullivan studied the tactical projections on her display. 51 human ships against 15 Vorthak vessels looked like good odds, but they were entering unknown territory against an enemy with unknown capabilities. "Continue training rotations," she ordered. "I want every crew member, every pilot, every Marine to be at peak readiness when we arrive. We get one chance to make a first impression on the galactic stage." As the days passed, the intensity of training only increased. The humans pushed themselves harder, knowing that failure meant not just military defeat, but the loss of an innocent species and humanity's reputation as protectors of the weak. On the final day before arrival, Admiral Sullivan addressed the entire task force over the communication system. "Tomorrow we arrive at Kepler 442b, she began. "Tomorrow we face an enemy that believes might makes right, that the strong can prey upon the weak without consequence. They have spent weeks tormenting an innocent species, secure in the belief that no one would come to help. The fleet hung in hyperspace, ready to drop back into normal space for the final approach. They're about to learn that they were wrong. Humanity has come to help, and we don't negotiate with genocidal monsters, we annihilate them." The space battle began with a sound that had never been heard before in the galaxy, the roar of human kinetic cannons firing in perfect synchronization. The Retribution's main batteries opened fire first, sending streams of accelerated metal toward the largest Vorthak bio-dreadnought at a significant fraction of light speed. Captain Lopez watched from the bridge as her shots closed the distance in seconds. The Vorthak ship's organic shields flared with sickly green energy, then collapsed entirely as the kinetic rounds punched through like bullets through paper. "Direct hits," the weapons officer reported with satisfaction. "Enemy shields down, hull breaching in multiple sections." The Vorthak had built their ships to handle energy weapons and biological attacks. They had never encountered anything like human kinetic weapons, which relied on pure physics rather than exotic energy fields. Metal traveling at tremendous velocity. "Didn't care about alien shield technology. All ships concentrate fire on the bio-dreadnoughts," Admiral Sullivan ordered. "Take out their heavy units first." The human fleet moved with deadly precision. The dreadnoughts Retribution and Justice anchored the battle line, their massive guns tearing chunks out of Vorthak capital ships. Around them, 24 destroyers, and cruisers swarmed like angry hornets, their smaller weapons picking apart enemy escorts. The Vorthak response was immediate and vicious. Their bioships launched clouds of what appeared to be living projectiles, organisms that twisted through space toward the human fleet. But human point defense systems had been designed to handle missile swarms and debris fields. The alien bioweapons were destroyed long before they could reach their targets. "Enemy bioweapons neutralized," reported Captain Ben Davis from the carrier Justice. "Launching fighter squadrons." Wing Commander Rachel Kim led the first wave of human fighters into the battle space. Her pilots had trained for this moment their entire careers, but nothing could have prepared them for the sight of Vorthak fighter craft. The alien fighters were more like living creatures than machines, their hulls pulsing with organic rhythms as they moved through space. They were fast and agile, but they flew with patterns that made sense to biological minds, not the chaotic unpredictability that human pilots had learned in Earth's dangerous skies. "Delta Squadron, engage at will," Kim ordered. "Remember, these things think like animals, not machines." The human fighters tore into the Vorthak formations with devastating effect. Lieutenant Karen Wade pulled her craft through a maneuver that would have liquefied most organic species, her human reflexes allowing her to survive acceleration forces that the Vorthak couldn't match. Her plasma cannons raked across an alien fighter, burning through its organic hull like a hot knife through flesh. The creature ship convulsed and died, its biological systems failing as its pilot was killed by forces its species had never evolved to handle. "Another one down," Wade reported. "These things can't handle our acceleration tolerances." Within minutes, the space around the planet was filled with the debris of destroyed Vorthak fighters. The aliens had never faced pilots who could pull 15G turns without losing consciousness, or who could think tactically while experiencing forces that would crush most biological species. Back on the main battle line, the Vorthak bio-dreadnoughts were fighting back with weapons that defied human understanding. One of the massive ships extruded what appeared to be a living cannon, which fired streams of corrosive material toward the human fleet. "Incoming bioacid," the tactical officer reported. "Hull-eating compound, similar to some Earth-based organisms, but much more concentrated." Captain Lopez smiled grimly. Humans had been dealing with corrosive environments since they first crawled out of the primordial ooze. Their ships were built to handle everything from acid rain to radiation storms. "Emergency hull sealant deployed," the damage control officer announced. "Acid neutralized, hull integrity maintained." The human response was immediate and overwhelming. The Retribution fired its full kinetic broadside into the bio-dreadnought that had attacked them. The alien ship, designed to handle energy weapons and biological attacks, had no defense against tons of metal moving at relativistic speeds. The Vorthak vessel broke apart like a flower exploding, its organic components separating as the kinetic. Rounds tore through its structure. Biomechanical fluid sprayed into space as the massive ship died in convulsions of failing biological systems. "Target destroyed," Lopez reported with savage satisfaction. "One bio-dreadnought down, 2 to go." Commander Drew Phillips was coordinating the intelligence gathering from the flagship's Combat Information Center. "Admiral, we're learning a lot about Vorthak technology. Their ships are essentially giant organisms, which makes them vulnerable to specific types of damage." "Explain," Sullivan ordered, while watching another Vorthak cruiser break apart under human fire. "Their bioships can heal minor damage, but catastrophic trauma kills them instantly. They can't regenerate from kinetic penetration the way they can from energy weapons." It explained why the Vorthak had been so successful against other species. Energy weapons would wound their ships without killing them, allowing the organic hulls to heal over time. But human kinetic weapons caused damage that no amount of biological healing could repair. The battle was turning into a massacre. Human weapons, designed for the harsh realities of fighting in space, were proving devastatingly effective against alien biotechnology. The Vorthak had built their fleet to intimidate and overwhelm peaceful species. They had never encountered an enemy that shot back with such deadly efficiency. One of the smaller Vorthak vessels attempted to ram the destroyer Vigilant, its biomechanical hull reforming into a spike-like projection. Captain Jim Parker, commanding. The destroyer watched the alien ship approach with professional interest. "Ramming attack," he observed calmly. "How quaint." The Vigilant's point defense systems opened fire, shredding the approaching bioship with rapid-fire kinetic rounds. The alien vessel disintegrated before it could close half the distance, its organic components scattered across space like gore from a slaughterhouse. "Target eliminated," Parker reported. "Alien ramming tactics ineffective." The largest Vorthak bio-dreadnought, apparently the flagship, was making a desperate attempt to escape the battle. Its massive bulk began moving toward the edge of the A system, abandoning the smaller ships to their fate. "Oh, no, you don't," Admiral Sullivan muttered. "All ships, pursue the flagship. Don't let any of them escape." The human fleet surged forward in pursuit, their ships easily outpacing the wounded bio-dreadnought. The alien vessel was leaking fluids and organic matter, its hull scored by dozens of kinetic impacts. Captain Davis, commanding the Justice, maneuvered his carrier into firing position. "Admiral, requesting permission to finish this." "Granted. Send them to hell." The Justice fired a full spread of antimatter torpedoes, the most powerful weapons in the human arsenal. The warheads closed the distance in seconds, then detonated, in a series of miniature suns that lit up space for thousands of kilometers. When the light faded, there was nothing left of the Vorthak flagship but expanding clouds of ionized gas. The battle was over. In less than 6 hours, the human fleet had destroyed 17 Vorthak vessels without losing a single ship. The space around Kepler 442b was littered with the debris of alien bioships, their organic components slowly dissolving in the vacuum. "All enemy vessels destroyed," the tactical officer reported. "No survivors detected." Admiral Sullivan looked out at the devastated planet below them. The immediate threat was over, but the real work was just beginning. Somewhere on that wounded world, Zelani survivors were waiting for rescue. "Colonel Turner," she announced over the fleet communication system, "prepare your Marines for planetary assault. It's time to see what the Vorthak left behind." The Battle of Kepler 442 was over, but humanity's war against alien monsters had just begun. Task Force Vengeance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system like a pack of wolves emerging from the darkness. 51 human warships materialized in perfect formation, their sensors immediately beginning to map the battlefield. Ahead, Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as the tactical displays filled with data. What they revealed made even hardened veterans sick to their stomachs. "Dear God," Captain Lopez whispered. Kepler 442b hung in space like a wounded animal. The planet that had once been home to the peaceful Zelani civilization was scarred with massive craters where orbital bombardment had torn away entire continents. Atmospheric analysis showed toxic clouds of burning cities and industrial complexes. But worst of all were the artificial structures visible even from this distance. "Magnify Sector 7, Sullivan ordered. The main display zoomed in on a massive alien vessel, hovering in low orbit over what had once been the Zelani's largest city. The ship was unlike anything in human databases, its biomechanical design suggesting a civilization that blended technology with living tissue. Grotesque appendages extended from the hull, reaching down into the planet's atmosphere like the tentacles of some cosmic horror. "What the hell is that thing doing?" Colonel Turner asked. Commander Phillips had been analyzing the sensor data. "Based on energy signatures, it appears to be harvesting something from the surface. Large-scale material transfer from planet to ship." Dr. Chen's face had gone pale. "They're not just raiding the planet, they're strip-mining the population." The implications hit everyone at once. The Vorthak weren't content with simple conquest. They were literally harvesting everything, of value from the Zelani homeworld, including the people themselves. "Full sensor sweep," Sullivan ordered. "I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." The results painted a picture of systematic horror. 17 Vorthak vessels orbited the planet, ranging from massive dreadnoughts to smaller harvesting ships. But it was the nature of their operations that truly shocked the human crews. "Admiral," the sensor operator reported, his voice shaking. "We're detecting massive biosignatures being transferred from the planet to the ships, but the readings suggest the biological material is still alive." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems. The Vorthak weren't just killing the Zilani. They were taking them alive for whatever twisted purposes their experiments required. Captain Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system from the Terra Nova. "Admiral, we've been monitoring Vorthak communications for the past week. Dr. Chen was right about their language patterns. They refer to the Zilani as breeding stock and test subjects." Sullivan felt rage building in her chest, a cold fury that surprised her with its intensity. Around the bridge, she could see similar reactions on every face. The human crews had come expecting to fight monsters. They hadn't expected to find something this evil. "Long-range reconnaissance," she ordered. "I want detailed scans of every enemy vessel. Weapons, armor, crew complements, everything." The human ships spread out in a wide sensor net, their advanced detection systems probing the Vorthak fleet from a safe distance. What they found was both encouraging and terrifying. Enemy vessels appear to be roughly equivalent to our technology level, the tactical officer reported. "But, sir, their weapon signatures are unusual. Heavy emphasis on what appear to be biological weapons systems." Dr. Chen was studying the technical readouts. The ships themselves seemed to be partially organic. Living metal, biological computing systems, weapons that fire some kind of virulent payload rather than kinetic rounds. It explained why the Vorthak had been so successful against the peaceful Zilani. Their bioweapons would be devastating against any species that hadn't developed specific countermeasures. But humans had been dealing with biological threats since the first plague hit Earth. Their medical technology and protective systems were among the most advanced in human space. The largest Vorthak vessel, easily twice the size of the Retribution, detected the human presence and began transmitting. The alien communication came through the translation computers as a mixture of arrogance and threat. "Unknown vessels, you have entered Vorthak territorial space. Withdraw immediately or be harvested, along with the failed species of this world." Admiral Sullivan felt her jaw clench. "Reply to that transmission." "Channel open, Admiral." Sullivan's voice was ice-cold as she responded. "This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Terran Defense Force. You are committing genocide against the Zilani. People, cease your operations immediately and surrender for trial or face the consequences." The response came back quickly, and the translation made it clear that the Vorthak found the human ultimatum amusing. "Terrans, another failed species. Your biological signatures indicate you are suitable for our breeding programs. Surrender now, and your deaths will be efficient." Admiral Sullivan looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. She saw anger, determination, and the cold professionalism of soldiers who had found their enemy. "Send this message to all Vorthak vessels," she said. "From Admiral Sullivan to whatever passes for Vorthak command. You have exactly one chance to withdraw from this system and release all Zilani prisoners. If you refuse, task force vengeance. We'll demonstrate why humans are the apex predators of their homeworld." The Vorthak response was immediate and predictable. The alien fleet began moving into attack formation, their biomechanical ships flowing through space with unsettling grace. Energy readings spiked as weapon systems powered up. "Enemy vessels are taking aggressive posture," the tactical officer reported. 17 ships total, including 3 of those massive bio-dreadnoughts. Sullivan activated the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. The enemy has refused our ultimatum and chosen to fight. Remember why? We're here. Remember what they've done to the Zilani. Remember that this is humanity's first impression on the galactic stage. She paused, watching as the human fleet moved into its own battle formation with practiced precision. Today we show the galaxy what happens when monsters threaten the innocent. Today we show them that humanity doesn't negotiate with genocidal regimes. Her voice hardened to steel. We annihilate them. The two fleets faced each other across the void, humanity and the Vorthak preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of an entire species. But Admiral Sullivan was already confident of the outcome. The Vorthak had made the mistake of thinking that humans were just another weak species to be harvested. They were about to learn the difference between predator and prey. The space around Kepler 442b was about to become a graveyard for alien monsters, and a birthplace for humanity's reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous protectors. All ships, Sullivan announced, weapons free. Show them what Deathworlders can do. The assault shuttles descended through Kepler 442b's smoke-filled atmosphere like avenging angels. Colonel Sam Turner watched from the lead craft as the scarred surface of the Zilani homeworld grew larger below them. What had once been a peaceful civilization was now a nightmare landscape of burning cities and alien installations. 2 minutes to touchdown, the pilot announced. Landing zone appears clear, but sensors are picking up movement in the surrounding structures. Turner activated his suit's communication system. All units, this is Colonel Turner. Remember your rules of engagement. Any Zilani civilians are to be protected at all costs. Any Vorthak forces are to be eliminated without mercy. Any enslaved aliens forced to fight for the Vorthak are to be given a chance to surrender. The Marines around him checked their weapons one final time. These were veterans of colonial wars and frontier conflicts, soldiers who had learned their trade in the harshest environments humanity had to offer. But nothing in their experience had prepared them for what they were about to encounter. The first landing zone was a crater where a Zilani city had once stood. Sergeant Pete Collins led his squad out of the assault shuttle, their boots crunching, on ground that was still hot from orbital bombardment. The air was thick with ash and the smell of death. Jesus, one of his Marines whispered. What did they do to this place? Collins had seen devastation before, but this was different. This wasn't the result of war between equals. This was the systematic destruction of a civilization by an enemy that viewed other species as resources to be harvested. Stay alert, he ordered. Sensors show underground installations 2 clicks north. That's where the survivors will be. The Marine units spread out across the devastated landscape, moving with practiced efficiency toward the Vorthak installations. Overhead, human fighters provided air cover, their sensors scanning for any remaining alien forces. Lieutenant Karen Wade had transferred from her fighter to a ground attack craft specifically designed for close air support. From her cockpit, she could see the full extent of the Vorthak atrocities. Massive biomechanical structures rose from the ground like cancerous growths, their surfaces pulsing with organic rhythms. Ground control, this is Angel 1, she reported. I'm seeing large concentrations of life signs in the alien installations, definitely non-human, possibly Zilani survivors. The first Vorthak ground installation came into view as Collins's squad crested a ridge of debris. The structure was like nothing in human databases, a twisted fusion of technology and biology that seemed to breathe as they watched. Organic tubes extended from its walls, disappearing into the ground like roots or veins. "What the hell is that thing?" one of the Marines asked. Collins consulted his tactical display. According to command, it's a processing facility. The Vorthak use them to prepare biological specimens for transport. The implications hit the squad immediately. They weren't looking at a military installation. They were looking at an alien slaughterhouse. Rules of engagement just changed, Collins announced grimly. Anything moving in there that isn't Zalani gets put down. No prisoners, no mercy. The Marines advanced on the installation with deadly purpose. The outer walls were defended by creatures that had once been members of other species, aliens that the Vorthak had modified and enslaved for use as soldiers. But the mind-controlled defenders were no match for human military tactics. Collins's squad moved through the facility like a scalpel, cutting through alien defenses with precision fire. The modified slaves fell quickly, their alien masters having never encountered enemies who could think tactically while moving at high speed through dangerous terrain. The interior of the facility was a vision of hell. Organic chambers lined the walls, each containing what appeared to be a member of a different alien species. Some were clearly Zalani, their slender forms barely alive in biomechanical pods. Others belonged to species the humans had never seen before. "Medical team to my location immediately," Collins called over his radio. "We've got survivors, but they're in bad shape." Dr. Janet Foster was already en route with her trauma teams. The chief medical officer had seen the worst that war could offer, but she had never dealt with the aftermath of systematic alien experimentation. "What's the situation?" she asked as her team established a field hospital in a cleared section of the facility. "Unknown number of alien survivors in biomechanical pods," Collins reported. "Some appear to be Zalani, others we can't identify. All of them look like they've been subjected to some kind of biological modification." Foster began examining the nearest pod, her medical scanners revealing readings that made no sense according to human biology. "The aliens in these pods have been genetically altered. The Vorthak were using them as test subjects for biological weapons." The rescue operation continued throughout the day as human forces cleared one Vorthak installation after another. Each facility revealed new horrors, new evidence of the systematic cruelty that the alien empire inflicted on conquered species. In one installation, Captain Ryan Burke's company discovered chambers filled with juvenile aliens of various species. The young creatures had been subjected to experiments that defied description, their bodies modified for purposes that human minds could barely comprehend. "This is beyond genocide," Burke reported to Colonel Turner. "They're not just killing these species. They're turning them into weapons and test subjects." But there was hope as well as horror. In facility after facility, human medical teams found survivors. Zalani civilians who had somehow avoided capture, members of other species who had been taken from their homeworlds years ago, even some humans from ships that had disappeared in deep space. Dr. Foster worked around the clock to treat the survivors, her medical teams adapting human equipment to work with alien biology. "The good news is that most of the modification process is reversible," she explained to Admiral Sullivan during a status report. "The bad news is that it's going to take months of treatment to undo what the Vorthak did to these people." As the human forces advanced, they encountered evidence of resistance. The Zalani, despite being a peaceful species, had fought back against their captors in the final days before the human arrival. Hidden bunkers contained weapons improvised from farming equipment, and the bodies of Vorthak overseers showed that some aliens had died fighting for their freedom. One of the most significant discoveries came when Sergeant Collins's squad found a hidden chamber containing Zalani leadership. Healer Zethara, The same individual whose distress call had brought humanity to Kepler 442b was among the survivors. The Zilani leader was weak but conscious when the human medics reached her. Through translation software, she was able to communicate with her rescuers. "You came," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "We sent the message into the void and you came." Colonel Turner knelt beside the alien healer, his expression gentle despite the horrors he had witnessed. "We're human," he said simply. "We don't abandon people who need help." The planetary liberation took 72 hours to complete. When it was over, every Vorthak installation had been destroyed or captured, and nearly 3,000 alien survivors had been rescued from facilities across the planet. But the real victory was more than just military. Word of the human intervention was spreading across the galaxy through alien communication networks. Other species that had suffered under Vorthak oppression were learning that someone had finally stood up to the alien empire. Admiral Sullivan received reports of uprisings on a dozen worlds where the Vorthak had established control. The news of their defeat at Kepler 442b was inspiring other species to fight back against their oppressors. "It's working," Commander Phillips reported from the Intelligence Center. "The Vorthak Empire is facing rebellions across their territory. Their reputation for invincibility has been shattered." Sullivan looked out at the planet below, where human medical teams were still working to save alien lives. "Good. Let the galaxy know that the Vorthak can be beaten. Let them know that humanity will help anyone who asks for it." The liberation of Kepler 442b was complete, but it was only the beginning. Humanity had announced its presence on the galactic stage, and the announcement had been written in the wreckage of alien warships and the liberation of enslaved populations. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the galaxy was a very different place. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Terran Protectorate Station, watching as ships from dozens of species came and went through the bustling spaceport that had grown up around the liberated Zilani homeworld. The news of humanity's decisive victory over the Vorthak Empire had spread like wildfire through alien communication networks. Within weeks of the liberation, species across the galaxy had begun reaching out to the human government, some seeking protection, others offering alliance, and many simply wanting to thank the people who had finally stood up to the galactic bullies. "Daily status report," Admiral Sullivan requested from her aide. Commander Lisa Ward consulted her tablet. 17 new species have made formal contact with the Terran government in the past week. The Zilani Council has formally ratified the Mutual Defense Treaty, and we've received 43 more requests for assistance from systems currently under Vorthak occupation. Sullivan nodded, but her expression remained concerned. The liberation of Kepler 442b had been just the beginning. The Vorthak Empire controlled hundreds of systems across the galaxy, and each one contained enslaved populations that needed rescue. The immediate aftermath of the battle had been almost as challenging as the fighting itself. Dr. Janet Foster's medical teams had worked around the clock to treat the survivors of Vorthak experimentation, developing new procedures and technologies to reverse the alien modifications that had been inflicted on captive populations. "How are the rehabilitation programs proceeding?" Sullivan asked. "Better than expected," Ward replied. Dr. Foster reports that 87% of the survivors have made full recoveries. The Zilani healing technology has been invaluable in treating the more severe cases. The cooperation between human and Zilani medical teams had produced remarkable results. The peaceful aliens possessed healing technologies that far exceeded human capabilities, while humans brought military medical experience and the ability to work under extreme conditions. Together, they had saved lives that neither species could have saved alone. But the most significant development had been the trial of the captured Vorthak officers. General Thakvar and his surviving commanders had been taken alive during the final assault on their ground installations, and their trial had become the galaxy's first interspecies tribunal for war crimes. Status of the War Crimes Tribunal? Sullivan inquired. Judgments were handed down yesterday, Ward reported. All defendants found guilty on all charges. The evidence was overwhelming. The trial had been broadcast across the galaxy, allowing every species to see the evidence of Vorthak atrocities. The testimony of survivors and the presentation of captured Vorthak records had painted a picture of systematic cruelty that shocked even species who had long known of the Empire's brutality. More importantly, the trial had established legal precedents that would govern future human interventions. The Terran Protection Doctrine, announced by Admiral Sullivan during her address to the Galactic Council, made it clear that humanity would respond to any distress call with overwhelming force. The doctrine was simple. Any species that commits genocide, enslaves other intelligent beings, or conducts experiments on captive populations will face the full military might of the human race. We do not negotiate with monsters. We eliminate them. The effect on galactic politics had been immediate and dramatic. Species that had suffered under Vorthak oppression suddenly found themselves with a powerful ally willing to fight for their freedom. Other aggressive civilizations began reconsidering their expansionist policies when faced with the possibility of human intervention. Captain Jake Morrison had been promoted to admiral and given command of the new Terran Response Fleet, a military force specifically designed to answer distress calls from anywhere in the galaxy. His colony ship Terra Nova had been converted into a mobile command center equipped with the most advanced communication systems human technology could provide. "Any new distress calls?" Sullivan asked. "3 in the past week," Ward replied. 2 from systems currently under Vorthak occupation, 1 from a species being threatened by another aggressive empire called the Hegemony. The response fleet had already conducted 6 successful liberation operations, each one adding to humanity's growing reputation as the galaxy's protectors. The tactics developed during the Kepler campaign had proven effective against other alien aggressors, most of whom had never encountered an enemy that combined human tactical thinking with overwhelming firepower. The liberation campaigns had also revealed the true scope of Vorthak atrocities. Facility after facility had been discovered containing the survivors of dozens of extinct civilizations, species that had been wiped out by the alien empire over the past several centuries. Dr. Alex Chen had been appointed as the first director of interspecies affairs, tasked with managing humanity's relationships with the growing number of alien allies. His office had become the busiest place on the Protectorate Station as representatives from across the galaxy sought human assistance or simply wanted to establish diplomatic relations. "The Zelani have made an interesting proposal," Ward continued. "They want to establish a joint research facility to study Vorthak biotechnology. Their goal is to develop countermeasures that can be shared with other species." Sullivan considered this. The captured Vorthak facilities had contained biological weapons and modification technologies that could be turned to beneficial purposes. With proper research and safeguards, the same techniques used to enslave aliens could be used to cure diseases and heal injuries. "Approved," she decided. "But I want strict oversight. The last thing we need is for anyone to start using Vorthak techniques for the wrong purposes." The transformation of Kepler 442b itself had been remarkable. The Zalani, working with human engineers, had begun rebuilding their civilization with improvements that made their world more beautiful than it had ever been. The scars of Vorthak occupation were slowly healing, replaced by parks, research facilities, and monuments to the species that had been saved by human intervention. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. Before the Kepler intervention, humans had been unknown outside their own small corner of space. Now they were recognized as the most powerful military force in the galaxy, and more importantly, as a species that used that power to protect the innocent rather than conquer the weak. Admiral Sullivan received a priority communication from Earth, and she smiled as she read the contents. The message was from President Maria Santos, informing her that the Terran Congress had approved unlimited funding for the response fleet and had authorized the construction of 50 new warships specifically designed for liberation operations. The public response has been overwhelmingly positive, the message continued. Humanity is proud to be known as the galaxy's protectors. Continue the good work. Sullivan looked out at the bustling spaceport again, watching as human ships prepared to depart for their next missions. Some were heading to Vorthak-occupied systems to liberate enslaved populations. Others were delivering medical supplies and technological assistance to species that were rebuilding after years of oppression. The galaxy was learning that when humanity made a promise, they kept it. When they said they would answer distress calls, they meant it. When they said they would protect the innocent, they would move fleets across the galaxy to make it happen. Commander Ward approached with another update. Admiral, we've received a formal invitation from the Galactic Council. They want humanity to join as a permanent member, with special status as the designated protector of endangered species. Sullivan smiled. Draft a reply. Tell them we accept, but with conditions. Any species that commits atrocities against others will face immediate intervention. No political considerations, no diplomatic delays. Evil acts get swift responses. As the sun set over the rebuilt Zalani capital city below, Admiral Sullivan reflected on how much had changed since Captain Morrison first received that desperate transmission. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not as conquerors or explorers, but as protectors of those who could not protect themselves. The Vorthak Empire was crumbling as system after system rebelled against their oppressors, confident now that humanity would come to their aid if needed. Other aggressive species had begun moderating their behavior, unwilling to risk human intervention, and somewhere in the void of space, new distress calls were being transmitted by species facing extinction at the hands of monsters. But now they were not calling into empty darkness. They were calling to a species that had proven they would cross the galaxy to answer. The humans were listening, and they would come. The galaxy had learned that Deathworlders don't negotiate with evil. They annihilate it